The cold void of space stretched infinitely, a silent ocean where dying stars whispered the tales of empires long fallen. A distant supernova cast its fading light across the shattered remnants of a forgotten system. Planets, once vibrant with life and ambition, now lay cloaked in ruin, silent witnesses to a galaxy's slow decay. It was in these dying echoes that the legend of the Black Templars took root, born from fire and forged in unyielding faith. Before we journey further, know this: you are deeply cherished across the swirling constellations of this vast universe. Wherever you are, whatever the hour, your presence here is honored. Tell me, where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it there? Now, take your coffee, settle into the darkness, and let us step into the tale. In the midst of this cosmic desolation, a solitary battle cruiser cleaved through the shadows, its blackened hull a stark contrast against the dying light. The immortal vow bore the sigil of the Black Templars, an unyielding sword wrapped in chains, a beacon of relentless crusade and sacred vengeance. Within its labyrinthine corridors, whispers of loyalty and dread echoed through iron walls, a prelude to the storm gathering beyond. At the heart of this vessel stood Sigismund, first captain of the Black Templars, a warrior whose name was etched into the annals of legend and whose presence commanded the silent respect of thousands. His armor, as dark and unblemished as the void itself, bore the scars of countless wars. Each etched mark a testament to battles fought and brothers lost. His helm was removed, revealing a face carved by time and tempered by grief. Eyes that burn not with youthful fire, but with the weary glow of one who has seen the slow death of hope. Sigismund's mind was a tempest of contradictions. He was bound by unshakable faith to the Emperor's cause, yet haunted by the betrayals that had fractured the Imperium's unity. His heart, though armoured in zeal, concealed a seed of doubt that grew in the shadows of every victory and loss. To live beyond mortal years was a gift cursed with eternal solitude. He bore witness to friends and foes alike slipping into oblivion, while his own soul remained imprisoned in a ceaseless crusade. The Black Templars were not like other Space Marine chapters. Their crusades were unending, driven by fervour that bordered on fanaticism, and yet beneath their relentless drive lurked the burden of a past no armour could shield. The crusade that now loomed before them was unlike any other, a war to reclaim a system where a secret lingered, one that could fracture the fragile peace of the Imperium and ignite flames of rebellion and ruin. In the command chamber, Sigismund stood before a hololithic projection. Stars blinked out one by one as war fleets clashed silently across light years. The camera zoomed in on the fallen world of Velis Prime, once a jewel in the Imperium's crown, now a crucible of rebellion and dark ambition. The system's governor, a man named Lord Varnis, had defied the Emperor's will, aligning with heretical forces that whispered promises of power and eternal life. A low murmur passed through the assembled officers, men and women hardened by war, but still shackled by the horrors they had endured. Among them was Castellan Merrick, Sigismund's trusted confidant and advisor. His eyes, sharp and calculating, betrayed a mind always searching for the truth beneath the surface of loyalty and lies. "First Captain," Merrick began, "Velis Prime's defences are formidable, but fragmented. The rebellion has fractured into factions. Our crusade will face not only open warfare but the hidden dangers of betrayal within." Sigismund's gaze did not waver from the flickering stars. "The Black Templars have never faltered before," he said, voice steady, but laced with a sorrow only the truly immortal could bear. Yet this war will test more than our swords. It will test our souls. The weight of those words hung heavy in the chamber, a silent acknowledgement that battles were not fought only on battlefields, but within hearts and minds. For Sigismund, the greatest enemy was not the traitors who had turned Velis Prime, but the darkness gnawing at the edges of his own faith. As the immortal vow prepared to drop out of warp, Sigismund retreated to the quiet of his quarters. The room was sparse, functional, like the rest of the cruiser. But in the dim glow of a flickering light, memories surfaced unbidden. Faces of fallen brothers, echoes of vows whispered in blood and fire, and the haunting image of a command lost to time, the Emperor's own failed promise of a united Imperium. He reached into a hidden compartment, withdrawing an ancient reliquary, its surface etched with sacred scripture and worn smooth by centuries of devotion. Inside lay a shard of a Xenos artifact, a relic salvaged from a forgotten world, rumoured to hold a fragment of forbidden knowledge. Sigismund touched it gently, feeling the cold pulse beneath his fingers, a reminder that even in faith, shadows could creep. His thoughts spiraled inward. What was the cost of immortality when every victory was stained with the blood of the innocent? Could an empire built on unyielding will survive the fractures of its own ambition? And what of the men who swore loyalty, only to hide daggers behind their smiles? The ship shuddered as it slipped from the warp, stars stretching and contracting in a cosmic dance. The crusade was about to begin. But within Sigismund, the battle had already started. Beneath the surface of the Black Templars' righteous fury, doubts whispered in the darkness. Among the crew, alliances formed and broke like shifting tides. Castell and Merrick spoke in hushed tones with Chaplain Kalen, whose sermons of purity echoed through the ship's chapels, but whose eyes betrayed a man wrestling with his own guilt. Meanwhile, aboard a shadowy outpost orbiting Velis Prime, Lord Varnis plotted. His ambitions were far greater than simple rebellion. Rumours of biotransference experiments, an abomination that could grant mortals an unnatural immortality, had spread through the underworld like wildfire. It was said that Varnis sought to claim the power of the ancient Necrontyr, a secret lost for millennia. The galaxy watched, unaware that the fate of the Black Templars and the Imperium itself would hinge on choices made in whispered chambers, in silent betrayals, and in the shattered hearts of those who dared to seek eternal life. Sigismund's internal war raged as fiercely as the battles to come. To protect the Imperium, must he sacrifice his own humanity? And if he did, would the man he once was be lost forever? The stars dimmed as the immortal vow entered Velis Prime's orbit. The first salvo of the crusade would be fired soon, the beginning of an end. And in the shadows, betrayal stirred. The call to arms echoed across the ship. Sigismund stood once more before his brethren, a solemn figure against the backdrop of the black void. "Brothers," he spoke, voice like steel tempered by pain, "we fight not only for the Emperor's light, but to preserve our souls from the darkness that seeks to consume us. We will cleanse Velis Prime. We will face the traitors and the shadows within ourselves. This crusade will test us all, but it will also define what remains when the fire dies." The men around him nodded, some with fervour, others with uncertain eyes. Loyalty was a fragile thread in times such as these. As the boarding craft launched toward the surface, Sigismund's thoughts lingered on one truth. No empire, no matter how mighty, was immune to the poison of ambition and the scars of betrayal. The Black Templars' crusade was both a beginning and an elegy. The first step had been taken. The true war, the war within, was about to begin. The surface of Velis Prime was a scarred testament to centuries of conflict. Twisted metal ruins clawing at the sky, forest turned to ash, and the bitter stench of war hanging thick over desolate plains. Beneath the ashen skies, the Black Templars disembarked, their boots imprinting the dust of a world betrayed. They moved with purpose, a wave of steel and faith determined to reclaim what had been lost. Yet amidst the grim resolve, a deeper storm brewed within the ranks. Sigismund walked among his warriors, his presence both commanding and distant. His mind was burdened by visions not of battle, but of shadows creeping into the fortress of his soul. He had expected defiance from the traitors of Velis, but not this gnawing doubt that whispered from the edges of his consciousness. The warrior's faith, once a blazing beacon, flickered faintly. At his side marched Castellan Merrick, a man whose loyalty had never wavered, yet whose eyes carried the weight of questions unspoken. "First Captain," Merrick said quietly, "the rebels fracture into factions, some more dangerous than the others. It is not only the enemy's weapons we must fear, but the poison of discord." Sigismund's gaze was sharp. Discord is the enemy's greatest weapon. It corrodes from within, unseen until it is too late. They came upon a ruined city, the heart of the rebellion's resistance. Skirmishes erupted like sparks against the night, a brutal dance of death where brother fought shadow, and shadow bred betrayal. The Black Templars struck with ruthless efficiency, yet Sigismund noticed something else. The rebels were not united, nor were their goals purely heretical. In whispered moments captured by scouts, rumors of desperation and despair seeped through. Biotransference experiments gone awry, promises of forbidden life, and a rebellion fueled not just by ambition, but by fear of oblivion. In the War Council tent later that day, Sigismund stood before his officers, the weight of leadership etched into every line of his face. Maps flickered under hololithic lights, showing the fractured battle lines and pockets of resistance. Chaplain Kalin, his voice steady but grave, addressed the room. "Brothers, the sins of Velis Prime are not only those of heretics, but of souls lost to desperation. This crusade tests our faith as much as our blades." A young lieutenant, barely seasoned, spoke up. "But First Captain, if they seek unnatural life through these experiments, does that not threaten the sanctity of the Emperor's domain? Should we not crush them without hesitation?" Sigismund's eyes darkened. The Emperor's domain is vast and ancient, but it is not immune to suffering or doubt. We fight for purity, yes, but also for the souls caught in the darkness. To destroy without thought is to become no better than the enemies we face. The room fell silent. His words hung like a shadow over the assembled warriors. Even the fiercest among them felt the sting of the unspoken truth. This was not merely a battle of weapons, but of hearts and wills. Later, beneath the starless sky, Sigismund found himself alone in a quiet chapel carved into the rock of the planet. The flickering light of a single candle cast long shadows on ancient stone walls. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the weight of prayers whispered through centuries. He knelt before a shattered statue of the Emperor, fingers brushing against cold marble. "What am I becoming?" he wondered aloud, voice barely more than a whisper. "Is this endless crusade a blessing or a curse? I am immortal, yet I feel the decay within." The silence answered only with echoes of his own doubt. As he rose, footsteps approached, Castellan Merrick's steady stride. "First Captain," Merrick said softly, You carry a burden few can understand. Sigismund nodded slowly. Immortality is a prison. To watch generations pass while I remain is a torment. I fear that in trying to save this Imperium, I may be losing myself. Merrick's expression softened. We all wear masks, Sigismund. Loyalty is a fragile thing when shadowed by the cost of eternity. But your faith is our shield. Before Sigismund could respond, a sharp alarm shattered the quiet. A distress signal from the outskirts. Reports flooded in. A faction of rebels had taken a high-ranking noble hostage, threatening to execute him unless the Crusaders withdrew. The council convened swiftly. This hostage was not only a symbol of imperial power, but a key to the fragile peace held among some of the planet's fractured factions. To lose him would mean chaos, open rebellion spreading like wildfire. Sigismund's eyes narrowed. We will not negotiate with traitors, yet we must act with precision. This is not only a battle of arms, but of wills. A plan was formed, one requiring a delicate balance of force and diplomacy. Sigismund chose to lead the rescue personally, a decision met with both respect and apprehension. That night, as preparations were made, Sigismund's thoughts wandered back to the relic he carried, a shard rumoured to hold forbidden power. Was it possible that the rebellion's unnatural experiments were connected to this ancient secret? And if so, what horrors awaited beyond the battlefield? The boarding party moved under the cloak of darkness, threading through ruined corridors and broken towers. Each step was a test of faith and endurance. The rebels were desperate and ruthless, but Sigismund's warriors fought with the unyielding resolve of the Emperor's chosen. In the heart of the rebel stronghold, Sigismund faced a grim tableau. The hostage chained, eyes wide with fear, surrounded by those who had once been neighbours, now consumed by the hunger for survival and power. As the Templars stormed the chamber, betrayal revealed itself not in enemy ranks, but within their own. One of Sigismund's trusted lieutenants, Captain Varric, stepped forward, his blade not raised against the enemy, but poised toward his brethren. I have served faithfully, Varric hissed, but this crusade is folly. The Imperium is crumbling. We must embrace the new dawn, or perish with the old. Shock rippled through the Templars. Sigismund's voice was a cold command. Varric, you betray your oath and your brothers. The traitor's eyes flickered with desperation and conviction. I betray a dying empire to save what remains. Will you fight for a hollow throne while the galaxy burns? A brutal duel ensued, steel clashing with the fury of a storm. Sigismund fought not only for the hostage, but for the soul of his chapter and the empire they served. When the dust settled, Varric lay defeated, but the scars of betrayal ran deeper than any wound. The hostage was freed, yet the victory tasted bitter. Sigismund knew the war was no longer simply against the rebels. It was against the fractures within himself and those he led. In the quiet aftermath, Sigismund confronted Castellan, Merrick. Trust is fragile, he said, easily broken and not easily mended. Merrick nodded. And yet, it is all we have. The fires of rebellion still burned across Velis Prime, but a darker flame had been lit, one of suspicion and doubt among the Templars themselves. That night, Sigismund returned to his quarters, haunted by Varric's words. Was the crusade a desperate grasp at a fading dream? Could the Black Templars survive the betrayal within their own ranks, or would they be consumed by the very darkness they sought to destroy? He touched the ancient relic once more, feeling its cold pulse. The answers, if they existed, lay buried deep in the shadows of the past and the uncertain promise of the future. The morning light on Velis Prime was a cruel reminder that no darkness lasts forever, nor does any hope burn without cost. The Black Templars regrouped amid the smouldering ruins, their banners still raised, though heavy with soot and blood. Sigismund moved silently through the ranks, each face telling its own tale of weariness and determination. But beneath the armor of these warriors lay the seeds of uncertainty. The aftermath of Varric's betrayal had rippled through the chapter, fracturing the fragile trust that bound them. The once unshakable faith now seemed like a brittle veneer, ready to crack at the slightest pressure. Sigismund's quarters, once a sanctuary, had become a chamber of endless contemplation. The relic he carried, a shard of Xenos origin, mysterious and cold, rested on the table like a silent accusation. Its power was whispered in legends, said to hold knowledge beyond mortal grasp. But power always demanded a price. As he traced the ancient runes etched into its surface, his thoughts drifted back to the origins of the Black Templars themselves. Born from the ashes of the Horus heresy, forged in blood and fire, they were a crusade without end, an eternal flame burning against the void. Yet even eternal flames can flicker, and the darkness waiting beyond was patient. A soft knock interrupted his reverie. Castellan Merrick entered, his face grave. "First Captain, the situation grows worse. Intelligence reports suggest that Lord Varnis has unleashed biotransference trials deeper within Velasis's underground labs." Sigismund's eyes darkened. They meddle with forces not meant for mortal hands. Such heresy threatens not only the flesh but the soul. Merrick nodded. "And there are whispers that some of our own may be tempted by the promise of immortality, the very thing we battle against." The weight of Merrick's words settled like a shadow over the room. Immortality, the curse and blessing that had marked Sigismund's own existence, was the forbidden fruit many sought to taste, blinded by fear and ambition. Later, in the War Council chamber, Sigismund convened a meeting with his most trusted officers. The war was no longer just a battle for a planet. It was a war for the hearts and minds of those who followed. Chaplain Kalin spoke solemnly. "The temptation of eternal life has broken more souls than the sharpest blade. We must be vigilant. The line between salvation and damnation grows thin." Lieutenant Eras, a fiery warrior new to the crusade, questioned boldly, "But if such power exists, why should we deny our brothers? Could it not strengthen the Imperium against its enemies?" Sigismund fixed Eras with a steady gaze. "Power gained without humility corrupts. We have seen what happens when man tries to steal what is not his. The Emperor's light does not shine on those who seek to defy his will." The debate stirred undercurrents of fear and hope alike. Some yearned for an end to endless war, others for the purity of the Emperor's design. But in these tensions, the Black Templars' unity wavered. As night fell, Sigismund sought out Chaplain Kalin. The chapel's stone walls bore silent witness to their shared burdens. "Faith is tested most when the enemy wears a familiar face," Sigismund murmured. Kalin replied, "And yet, even the darkest night is pierced by a single light. We must find that light, even if it means walking through shadow." The following day brought grim news. Scouts returned with reports of a clandestine cult operating within the rebel factions, worshippers of a forgotten god of death who promised resurrection through mechanized flesh. The Necrontier's ancient curse, it seemed, was awakening once more beneath Velis. Sigismund felt the cold fingers of fate tighten their grip. To face such a threat meant more than weapons. It demanded sacrifice and unyielding will. In the labyrinthine Undercity, Sigismund led a covert strike force to uncover the source of these heresies. The air was thick with the hum of forbidden machinery and the whisper of lost souls. As they delved deeper, ancient glyphs glowed faintly on rusted walls, symbols older than the Imperium itself. The team uncovered chambers where human flesh was melded with cold metal, victims transformed into horrific echoes of life. Among them, a figure stood, a former Imperial knight turned zealot, eyes glazed with fanatic devotion. Sigismund confronted the twisted man. "You defile the Emperor's creation. Your soul is lost." The zealot laughed, voice hollow. "I am eternal now. Death is no longer a master. We shall rise beyond flesh, beyond time." Sigismund's blade sang through the air, ending the heretic's blasphemy. Yet the echoes of that laughter haunted him long after. Back on the surface, the psychological wounds of war deepened. Among the Templars, rumors swirled that even the first captain might be touched by the darkness he fought. His solitary moments, his possession of the forbidden relic, fueled whispers of doubt. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Sigismund confided in Merrick. The line between guardian and tyrant blurs with each passing day. "I fear what I might become." Merrick placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "You carry the burden so that others do not have to. But beware, Captain. Sometimes the greatest enemy lies within." The chapter closed with the Black Templars preparing for a siege that would test not only their steel, but their very souls. The crusade was a crucible, forging legends and sacrifices alike. The galaxy waited with bated breath, unaware that in the darkest corners of Velis Prime, the true battle was not for territory, but for the heart of an empire, and the soul of a man who bore its fate. Velis Prime's skies were bruised with ash and storm, a turbulent canvas that mirrored the turmoil within the Black Templars. The battle for the planet had descended into a grinding siege, fortresses shattered, alliances shattered, and a creeping darkness that seemed to seep into every corner of the crusade. Amid this maelstrom, Sigismund stood upon the ramparts of the newly captured fortress of Raven's Hold. The once proud bastion was scarred and broken, yet it held, a fragile beacon in a world slipping toward chaos. His gaze stretched across the smoke-choked horizon, where the distant glow of fires and the distant thunder of artillery echoed like a dirge for a dying age. Beside him, Castellan Merrick's voice was low and measured. "The enemy grows desperate. They will strike soon, and not only with weapons. Velis is a crucible burning away more than just flesh." Sigismund's voice was grim. "The rebellion is not just a rebellion anymore. It is a sickness, a cancer eating at the bones of this world, and ours." The weight of command bore heavily. The Black Templars were warriors bred for glory and victory, yet this war demanded sacrifices that no sword could cleanse. Friends had fallen, brothers broken not by blade but by doubt. Inside the fortress, the atmosphere was tense. Officers whispered in darkened corridors, some questioning the crusade's purpose, others consumed by zealotry. The line between faith and fanaticism blurred dangerously. Sigismund convened a council, the room heavy with unspoken fears. Chaplain Kalin spoke first, voice echoing with sorrow. "The Emperor's light shines bright, but it cannot burn away the shadows we carry inside. We must confront not only the enemy, but the darkness within ourselves." Lieutenant Eras, his youthful zeal tempered by the harsh lessons of battle, pressed. "Are we to doubt our cause in the face of such evil? We fight for purity." Sigismund's gaze cut through the room. Purity is not the absence of doubt, but the courage to face it. Then came news that shook the council to its core. The discovery of a hidden chamber beneath Raven's Hold, filled with artifacts and recordings of ancient origin, revealing that the biotransference experiments were tied to a forgotten pact with the Necrontyr, and that Lord Varnis had harnessed this forbidden knowledge to grant his followers unnatural longevity. Merrick's voice was a whisper. "This changes everything. The rebellion is not merely mortal, it is becoming something else." Sigismund's hand closed around the hilt of his blade. "And we must stop it before it is too late." He ordered a strike force to investigate, but as the forces prepared, treachery once again lurked close. Captain Lysandros, a veteran known for his tactical brilliance, but rumoured for ruthless ambition, approached Sigismund privately. "First Captain," Lysandros said, "the time is ripe for a new order. Varnis's vision, though heretical, may be the only path forward. The Imperium's old ways are failing." Sigismund's eyes narrowed. "You speak treason." Lysandros smiled thinly. "Or truth. Consider carefully, Sigismund. Your eternal crusade may be a prison you cannot break." The seed of doubt was planted deep. Meanwhile, the Black Templars' chaplains struggled to maintain spiritual order. Kalen grappled with his own crisis of faith. Torn between loyalty to the Emperor and compassion for the suffering souls caught in this endless war, he began secretly questioning whether salvation lay in rigid doctrine or in understanding the desperation driving the rebellion. Beneath the fortress, the strike force uncovered horrors beyond imagining. Humanity twisted and fused with cold metal, minds enslaved by machines whispering promises of immortality. The corridors echoed with the screams of the lost, their identities swallowed by the Necrontyr's curse. Among the horrors, a recorded message from Lord Varnis played, his voice cold and resolute. "We seek not destruction, but transcendence. The Emperor's reign is ending. A new age dawns, born of flesh and machine." Sigismund's fury burned like a star about to collapse. This is heresy that threatens to unravel the very fabric of existence. But even as they destroyed the labs and purged the abominations, Sigismund could not shake the creeping dread. The rebellion's cause, though dark, was rooted in fear of death and oblivion, the same fear that had gnawed at his soul for centuries. That night, Sigismund stood once more in the fortress chapel. The candlelight flickered against the stone, shadows dancing like ghosts. He whispered a prayer not for victory, but for clarity. "Emperor," he breathed, "grant me strength to see through the darkness, to save what can be saved, and to know the path when it splits." Merrick approached quietly. "The path is never clear, First Captain, but it is yours to choose." The storm outside raged, thunder crashing like the drums of war. Sigismund knew the coming days would demand more than steel. They would demand sacrifice, betrayal, and a reckoning that could shatter the Black Templars forever. The Empire's fate hung by a thread, and beneath the dying stars, a choice waited. The night on Velis Prime was unnervingly silent, as if the planet itself held its breath before the coming storm. The Black Templars' forces had withdrawn temporarily to tend their wounds and gather strength, but beneath the quiet surface, the war festered, not only on the battlefield, but within the hearts of those who fought. Sigismund's quarters had become a chamber of restless shadows. The weight of command pressed on him like a leaden shroud, and the relic on his table pulsed with an almost imperceptible coldness. It was a constant reminder of forbidden knowledge and the price of eternity. He paced slowly, the sound of his footsteps muted against the cold stone floor. The faces of fallen comrades haunted his mind, each one a silent accusation, a question without answer. Was this endless crusade salvation or damnation? Could the Black Templars survive the fractures that tore at their own souls? A soft knock broke his thoughts. Castellan Merrick entered, his features drawn but resolute. "First Captain, the unrest among the ranks grows. Whispers of dissent, of doubt. Captain Lysandros' influence spreads." Sigismund's eyes darkened. Lysandros sows seeds of ruin with silver words. His ambition is a blade aimed at the heart of this crusade. Merrick nodded. "We must act cautiously. Open conflict would only hasten our undoing." The room seemed to close in, heavy with unspoken fears. Sigismund knew the path ahead was fraught with peril, not only from their enemies, but from within. The next day, Sigismund convened a clandestine meeting with his closest loyalists. The chamber was dimly lit, the air thick with tension. "We face a war on two fronts," Sigismund began, voice steady but edged with iron. Externally, the heretics and the twisted abominations threaten to consume Velis Prime. Internally, the cancer of ambition and doubt eats at our chapter. We must root it out before it destroys us. Chaplain Kalin stepped forward, his expression grave. "Faith is our shield, but faith without understanding is blind. We must find balance." Lieutenant Eras, eager yet wary, asked, "How do we confront those among us who question the Crusade's path without fracturing our unity?" Sigismund's gaze was piercing. "By reminding them what we fight for, and what is at stake should we fail." Yet even as plans were made, the shadow of betrayal grew darker. Captain Lysandros, emboldened by whispered promises and secret alliances, began to gather those disillusioned by the endless war and the seeming futility of their sacrifice. In the dim corridors of Raven's Hold, clandestine meetings took place. Words exchanged in hushed tones, glances that spoke of rebellion beneath the veneer of loyalty. One night, Lysandros confronted Sigismund privately. "You fight a war that cannot be won," he said coldly. "The Imperium is dying. We must embrace change or be swept aside." Sigismund's response was sharp. "Change forged in betrayal is no change at all. It is destruction." The clash of ideals was not only ideological, but deeply personal. Lysandros saw in Sigismund the embodiment of a bygone era, unwilling to embrace the future. Sigismund saw in Lysandros a dangerous heretic cloaked in ambition. Meanwhile, the rebels continued to deepen their hold, their twisted biotransference experiments growing more advanced and horrifying. Reports came of soldiers returning from the front, changed, no longer fully human, their wills enslaved by cold machines. Chaplain Kalin, tormented by his own doubts, sought counsel in the depths of the fortress chapel. "Emperor, guide us," he whispered. "In this darkness, grant us the strength to endure and the wisdom to discern." But the answers remained elusive. Amidst this turmoil, a new figure emerged, an envoy from the High Lords of Terror, bearing cryptic orders and warnings. He spoke of a deeper conspiracy, one that reached beyond Velis Prime and threatened to unravel the very fabric of the Imperium. His arrival only heightened the tension, as trust frayed further and the lines between friend and foe blurred. As the chapter neared its close, Sigismund stood once again on the ramparts, gazing into the swirling storm clouds above. The fight for Velis was no longer just a battle for a planet. It was a battle for the soul of the Black Templars, and perhaps the Imperium itself. In the heart of the storm, decisions awaited, decisions that would lead to sacrifice, betrayal, and the fate of all they held sacred. The siege of Velis Prime dragged on, its length turning stone and steel alike to dust under the grinding weight of war. The Black Templars bore their scars not only on armor, but deep within their spirits, the relentless crusade stretching the limits of endurance. Every victory felt hollow, every loss a fresh wound in a chapter fraying at the edges. Sigismund moved among his warriors with the measured grace of a commander who bore centuries of battle, yet his gaze was heavy with exhaustion. The burden of command was an invisible yoke, pressing down with the weight of countless lives entrusted to him, and countless more lost. Reports came of new experiments deep within the rebel laboratories. Techno-organic abominations, blending flesh and machine in horrific symbiosis. The rebellion was no longer merely a political insurrection, but a grotesque perversion of life itself. In the War Council, Chaplain Kalen spoke with a rare edge of urgency. The souls we fight to save may be lost already. We must act swiftly to sever the head of this unholy serpent. Lieutenant Eras, hardened by the brutal days past, voiced what many dared only whisper. And what of those among us who question the righteousness of our crusade? Our own brothers. The whispers grow louder. Sigismund's eyes darkened. Doubt is a poison, yet it is not to be silenced by the sword alone. We must confront it with steel and soul alike. As the council deliberated, a covert message arrived. Intelligence of a secret meeting between Captain Lysandros and the factions within the rebellion. Lysandros's ambition had metastasized into open treachery. Sigismund's decision was swift and resolute. A discreet strike team was assembled to root out the traitor before his treason could tip the scales. The night was thick with tension as Sigismund led the team through twisting corridors and shadowed chambers. The air was heavy with betrayal. Each step closer to Lysandros, a step deeper into the fracture threatening to rend the Black Templars. They found him amidst a circle of conspirators, voices hushed but fervent, plotting to seize control of the chapter and negotiate with Lord Varnis for shared dominion. The vision was one of a new order forged from compromise and power, a vision Sigismund could not abide. Steel clashed in the confined space as betrayal exploded into violence. Sigismund faced Lysandros not only as a warrior, but as a guardian of a fading legacy. The duel was fierce, a brutal ballet of strength and will, echoing the very conflicts tearing their souls apart. When Lysandros fell, silence reclaimed the chamber. Yet the cost was clear. The wounds inflicted upon the chapter's unity were deep, and the battle for their souls had only begun. In the days that followed, Sigismund wrestled with the consequences of his actions. Was the path of relentless crusade salvation or damnation? Could faith alone bind together a chapter unraveling from within? Meanwhile, Chaplain Kalen sought to heal the spiritual wounds ravaging the warriors. His sermons spoke of hope amidst despair, light amidst darkness. Yet even his faith was tested, as whispers of forbidden knowledge and the relic in Sigismund's possession reached his ears. One evening, Kalen confronted Sigismund in the fortress chapel, voice heavy with concern. "The relic you carry, it is a symbol of power and danger. What price are you willing to pay for the knowledge it holds?" Sigismund's gaze was distant. "Immortality is a curse, not a gift. I bear it to guard the Imperium's light, yet sometimes I fear I am the darkness it must destroy." Kalen nodded slowly, understanding the paradox that bound them. The war was no longer just against rebels and heretics, but against the erosion of their own souls. As the siege escalated, the Black Templars prepared for a final assault on Velis Prime's capital, where Lord Varnis awaited, wielding his blasphemous power. The battle would decide not only the planet's fate, but the soul of the chapter. Sigismund stood before his warriors, voice steady and resolute. This crusade tests us beyond blade and bolter. It tests our faith, our loyalty, and our very humanity. We fight not only for victory, but for the soul of the Imperium. The warriors responded with fervent cries, a wave of zeal and determination that surged through the fortress like wildfire. Yet beneath the roar of preparation, a quiet dread lingered, the fear that the greatest enemy might not be Lord Varnis or his heretics, but the darkness festering within the hearts of those who bore the Emperor's name. The final chapter of this crusade was near, and with it, choices would be made that could shatter or save all they held dear. The dawn broke like a fractured blade over the scarred landscape of Velis Prime. The Black Templars, battle-worn but unyielding, assembled beneath a sky heavy with ash and portent. The capital city, once a gleaming jewel of imperial glory, now lay shrouded in smoke and despair, a fortress besieged by heresy and shadow. Sigismund stood at the forefront, his armour dulled by the soot of countless battles, his eyes burning with a fire tempered by centuries of war. Around him, the warriors of the Black Templars prepared for the final assault, an operation to shatter the rebels' last bastion and end the blight festering in the heart of the planet. Yet within the chapter, an unseen battle raged. The betrayal of Captain Lysandros had left scars not so easily healed. Doubt whispered in the minds of some, while zealotry hardened others into unforgiving judgment. The unity of the Black Templars was a fragile thing, one misstep away from fracture. As the assault began, the ground trembled beneath the thunderous roar of artillery. The skies were torn by fire and flame, a hellish symphony heralding the end of an era. The rebels fought with desperation, wielding forbidden tech and twisted flesh to stave off the inevitable. Sigismund led the charge, his blade carving a path through the chaos. Yet even as enemies fell, he sensed the true threat lurking beyond the battlefield, the insidious poison of betrayal. Midway through the battle, a chilling revelation came to light. A faction within the Black Templars had covertly allied with the rebels, drawn by promises of power and the lure of unnatural life. The traitors sought to undermine the crusade from within, turning brother against brother. The shock sent ripples through the ranks. Sigismund's trusted lieutenant Eras faced accusations that shook the very foundations of the chapter. The young warrior's eyes held a mixture of defiance and pain. "I fight for the Emperor," Eras declared, voice unwavering, "but I will not blind myself to the truth. We cannot destroy what we do not understand." Sigismund's response was cold steel. Understanding does not excuse betrayal. The lines between loyalty and treason blurred in the fog of war. Amidst the carnage, Sigismund encountered Lord Varnis in the shattered throne room of the capital. The rebel leader was no longer the desperate insurgent, but a figure transformed by the dark powers of biotransference. His flesh a tapestry of metal and living tissue, eyes glowing with eerie light. "You fight for a dying empire, Sigismund," Varnis hissed. "Join me, and together we can forge a new destiny, one free from the chains of mortality." Sigismund's blade flashed. "Your destiny is a lie built on corpses." Their clash was brutal, echoing through the ruined halls like a storm unleashed. But even as Sigismund struck a decisive blow, the rebel leader's final words lingered, seeds of doubt that would haunt the Black Templars long after the battle. As the dust settled and the capital fell, the chapter faced a new dawn, a fragile peace shadowed by the cost of victory and the wounds that ran deeper than flesh. In the aftermath, Sigismund retreated to the fortress chapel, his spirit weary. He knelt before the shattered statue of the Emperor, hands trembling. "What is the price of immortality?" he whispered. "Is it the death of hope itself?" Castell and Merrick joined him, voice soft but resolute. "It is the burden of those who stand between darkness and oblivion." The war for Velis Prime was over, but the war within, the struggle for souls, for faith, for the future, had only just begun. The silence that followed the fall of Velis Prime was deceptive. A fragile veil stretched over a battlefield scarred by war and betrayal. The Black Templars, though victorious, carried wounds that would not heal with time or glory. Their triumph was a bitter draught, swallowed amid questions that festered like unseen poison. Sigismund wandered the shattered streets of the capital, the remnants of once great cathedrals and monuments crumbling around him like memories fading into dust. The air was thick with the scent of burnt flesh and machine oil, mingling as a testament to the horrors endured. As he paused beneath the fractured gaze of a statue of the Emperor, his thoughts turned inward. Immortality, the curse that had sustained him through centuries of war, felt increasingly like a shackle, binding him to a fate he neither chose nor desired. "Is eternal life a blessing or a sentence?" he murmured, voice lost in the whispering wind. A figure approached, Chaplain Kalin, whose solemn eyes reflected the same burden. The weight of endless years is heavier than any armor. Their conversation unfolded beneath the twilight sky, a moment of shared vulnerability amid a crusade forged in steel and faith. Elsewhere, unrest simmered within the chapter's ranks. The revelation of traitors and the ideological fractures laid bare by the siege had sown seeds of discord. Some questioned the unyielding zeal of their crusade. Others clung fiercely to dogma, unwilling to see the cracks widening beneath their feet. Lieutenant Eris, once brimming with fervour, now walked a path shadowed by doubt. His belief in the Emperor's vision was tested by the cost of war and the ambiguities of survival. He sought counsel from unexpected places, questioning whether the Crusade's purpose aligned with the sacrifices demanded. Captain Lysandros's name, though silenced by death, lingered like a spectre, a reminder that ambition and doubt were forces that no blade could sever completely. Sigismund convened a solemn assembly of the chapter's leaders. The war was won, but the peace was fragile, built on uncertain foundations. "We have faced enemies without and shadows within," Sigismund declared, voice carrying the weight of command and sorrow. "Now we must confront the legacy we leave, whether it is one of salvation or ruin." The council's debates were long and fraught, touching on faith, purpose, and the haunting allure of the forbidden relic that Sigismund bore. Some urged caution, fearing the corruption it represented. Others saw in it a means to protect the Imperium's future. Amid these tensions, a message arrived, an ominous warning from the High Lords of Terror. The Imperium itself was shifting, embroiled in conflicts far beyond Velis Prime, and the Black Templars' crusade was but one thread in a vast and tangled web. Sigismund felt the enormity of their struggle deepen. Their fight was not isolated but part of an eternal cycle of rise and fall, of light and shadow. That night, in the solitude of his chamber, Sigismund faced the relic once more. Its cold surface seemed to pulse with a heartbeat not his own, a reminder of the eternal burden he carried. He whispered a vow, not of hope, but of resolve. "For as long as I draw breath, I will bear this burden, not for glory, but for those who cannot." Outside, the stars flickered, distant, cold, and indifferent witnesses to a galaxy forever caught between salvation and despair. The Black Templars' crusade would march onward, into the unknown. But in the quiet moments between battles, the true war raged, a war for the soul of an empire and the hearts of those who carried its flame. The aftermath of Velis Prime's fall was a bitter dawn. The Black Templars bore the scars of victory, yet their spirits wavered under the weight of uncertainty. The war had been won, but the true battle for the heart of the chapter had only begun. Sigismund moved through the fortress like a shadow, his mind burdened by the ghosts of those lost and the relic that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The forbidden artifact had become both his weapon and his curse, a symbol of power tangled with despair. Within the dim halls, whispers spread like wildfire. Accusations, doubts, and veiled threats stirred unrest. Some brothers questioned the path forward, while others called for stricter purity, clinging desperately to faith as a shield against encroaching darkness. Lieutenant Eros found himself caught in this maelstrom, his resolve tested by the contradictions he witnessed. The zeal that had once burned bright was now tempered by the cold edge of disillusionment. One evening, as the fortress lay cloaked in silence, Eros sought out Chaplain Kalen. In the quiet sanctuary of the chapel, they spoke of faith, sacrifice, and the heavy cost of immortality. The line between devotion and obsession is thin, Kalen intoned. We walk a path lit by the Emperor's light, but shadows linger at every turn. Eros nodded, eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. I fear we may lose ourselves before the war ends. Meanwhile, Sigismund convened a secret council to address the fractures threatening to unravel their crusade. The chamber was tense, voices low but charged with passion and fear. We must decide what kind of legacy we will leave, Sigismund declared, voice resolute. Will we be remembered as saviors or as the architects of our own destruction? The debate turned to the relic, the source of both power and paranoia. Some advocated its destruction, fearing corruption. Others argued it was a necessary tool against the rising threats. In the shadows, new threats emerged. Reports of a secret faction within the Imperium, seeking to claim the relic for their own purposes, reached Sigismund. The war extended beyond Velis Prime, entangling politics, power, and ancient grudges. Amidst this turmoil, betrayal struck again. An assassin's blade found its mark in the depths of the fortress. The victim, a trusted officer, whose death sent ripples of fear and suspicion. Sigismund's resolve hardened. The enemy wears many faces, some familiar, some hidden. We must be vigilant. As tensions escalated, Sigismund found solace only in the quiet moments beneath the shattered statue of the Emperor. There, he wrestled with his own doubts and the crushing burden of immortality. Is eternal life a blessing or a sentence? He whispered to the void. Do I guard the flame, or am I its prisoner? The chapter stood at a crossroads, the choices made in the coming days poised to shape their fate, and perhaps that of the Imperium itself. The stars above flickered, indifferent witnesses to a saga of loyalty, sacrifice, and the inexorable march of time. The cold halls of the fortress echoed with a restless silence, as if the very stones mourned the trials they had witnessed. Sigismund stood atop the highest battlement, his gaze fixed on the starless void beyond. The endless expanse where countless empires had risen and fallen like dying embers. The weight of centuries pressed on him, a burden of memories etched in blood and sacrifice. Each victory had been a step deeper into an unyielding destiny, and each loss a wound that time refused to heal. Beneath him, the Black Templars prepared for another campaign. Whispers of rebellion flared anew in distant sectors, and the relic's power continued to call. a siren song of salvation and damnation intertwined. In the council chamber, voices rose and fell like the tide, arguments torn between duty and desperation. Chaplain Kalen's words cut through the cacophony with clarity. "We stand at the precipice, brothers. To falter now is to invite oblivion." Lieutenant Eras, his youth tempered by hardship, asked, "And if the path we tread is a shadow? What if our crusade blinds us to the true enemy?" The question lingered unanswered, a spectre in the chamber. Meanwhile, Sigismund wrestled with visions, fragments of a future stained with fire and betrayal. The relic's whispers grew louder, promising strength but demanding sacrifice. He knew the price would be steep and perhaps irreversible. A messenger arrived bearing grim news. A faction within the Imperium sought to seize the relic, seeing in it the key to their own ascendancy. The fragile alliances forged in the crucible of war threatened to crumble beneath ambition's weight. Sigismund's resolve hardened. The relic is not a prize to be won, but a burden to be borne. We will guard it, no matter the cost. But as plans formed and alliances shifted, the seeds of tragedy took root. In the quiet hours, Sigismund found himself drawn to the relic's cold embrace, its surface shimmering with arcane energy. He placed his hand upon it, feeling the pulse of centuries, the promise of immortality, and the whisper of inevitable loss. His thoughts drifted to those he had lost, the brothers, the innocents, the empire that seemed ever on the brink of collapse. Was this eternal fight salvation, or was it the final chain binding him to a fate of endless war? The answer remained elusive. As dawn broke, the Black Templars prepared to march once more into the maelstrom. The battles ahead would test their faith, their loyalty, and their very souls. In the heart of the galaxy, empires rose and fell, but the flame of the Black Templars burned on, fierce, unyielding, and haunted by the shadows of their own making. The weight of inevitability pressed upon the Black Templars like a suffocating shroud. The endless wars, the betrayals, the sacrifices, they had shaped Sigismund into a legend, yet also a prisoner of fate. Each choice carved deeper scars upon his soul, a testament to the cost of immortality. The battlefield was no longer merely a place of blood and fire. It was a crucible of broken oaths and shattered trust. The enemies they faced were legion, but perhaps the most dangerous foe lurked in the shadows of their own ranks. Reports filtered in of whispered conspiracies, of those who sought to claim the relic's power for themselves. The line between friend and foe blurred beneath the weight of ambition and desperation. In the heart of the fortress, Sigismund convened a council with his closest confidants. The air was thick with tension, voices hushed, yet charged with urgency. "We stand on the edge of ruin," Sigismund said, voice heavy with the burden of command. "The relic's power calls to many, and not all are loyal to the Emperor's light." Chaplain Kalen nodded solemnly. "The path ahead is shadowed. We must be vigilant, for even the purest can fall." Lieutenant Eras, wearied by the endless struggle, asked quietly, "What of redemption? Is it still possible, or are we doomed to repeat the sins of the past?" Sigismund's eyes bore into the young warrior. "Redemption is not given. It is earned in fire and blood." As the council debated, a shocking revelation emerged. An assassin had infiltrated the fortress, targeting those loyal to Sigismund. The threat was closer than anyone imagined. The ensuing hunt was brutal and unforgiving, sowing paranoia among the Black Templars. Trust became a scarce commodity, and every shadow a potential enemy. Amidst the chaos, Sigismund wrestled with his own doubts. The relic's power beckoned, a promise of strength, but at what cost? One night, in the solitude of his chamber, he confessed his fears to Chaplain Kalen. "I fear the line between guardian and tyrant grows thin." Kalen placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "You carry the burden so few can bear. Remember why you fight." But even as words offered comfort, the darkness crept closer. The final campaign loomed, a decisive battle that would determine the fate of the Black Templars, the relic, and perhaps the entire Imperium. Sigismund stood once more on the ramparts, the stars cold and distant above. The empire he fought for was fragile, a flickering flame against the void, yet in his heart burned a fierce resolve, a vow to fight until the last breath, to bear the weight of immortality, and to face the shadows within. The storm was coming. The night sky over Velis Prime was fractured by the distant echoes of artillery, an ominous reminder that the final storm was gathering. The Black Templars braced themselves, not only against the external enemy, but the insidious betrayals threatening to rend their chapter from within. Sigismund stood at the heart of the fortress, the relic's cold energy humming faintly beneath his gauntlet. The burden it represented was heavier than any armor, heavier even than the weight of countless battles fought and brothers lost. The council convened once more, faces drawn and voices taut with tension. The revelations of traitors and secret factions had shattered trust, forcing allies into uneasy alliances and foes into desperate gambits. Chaplain Kalen spoke solemnly, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The hour grows late and shadows lengthen. We must choose our path wisely, for our choices will echo across the stars." Lieutenant Eras, standing beside Sigismund, added, "The line between light and darkness blurs. We must be vigilant not to become what we fight against." Suddenly, a messenger burst into the room, breathless and pale. The rebels have unleashed their ultimate weapon, a biomechanical terror born from forbidden science. It marches toward the fortress now. A hush fell. The final battle was no longer a question of if, but when. Sigismund's gaze hardened. "Prepare the defenses. We will meet the storm head-on." As preparations unfolded, whispers grew of a secret pact, a betrayal that cut deeper than any blade. It was said that even some within the chapter had been seduced by the relic's promise, their loyalty wavering. In the fortress's shadowed corridors, Sigismund confronted one such brother, once a trusted comrade, now a whisper of doubt and ambition. The confrontation was swift and brutal, a painful severing of bonds forged in the blood. Yet even in victory, the scars remained, proof that the greatest battles were not fought with bolters, but within. The biomechanical horror approached, a monstrous fusion of flesh and machine, unstoppable and merciless. The defenders steeled themselves, their faith a fragile shield against the overwhelming tide. Sigismund took up his blade, the relic's power coursing through him, a beacon of hope and a curse entwined. The battle would decide not only the fate of Velis Prime, but the soul of the Black Templars. As the enemy broke upon the fortress walls, Sigismund's thoughts lingered on sacrifice and destiny. The path of immortality was lonely and fraught, yet he would walk it until the end. The clash was thunderous, a symphony of destruction and defiance. Brothers fell, enemies screamed, and the future hung in the balance. In the eye of the storm, Sigismund faced the ultimate choice, a decision that would shape the legacy of the chapter and the empire it sought to protect. The echoes of that night would resonate across eternity, a testament to loyalty, betrayal, and the cost of endless war. The storm had broken, and the fortress of Velis Prime was awash in fire and blood. The biomechanical horror lay shattered, but its destruction was but a prelude to a deeper reckoning. The battlefield was a crucible where loyalty and betrayal clashed in a desperate fight for survival. Sigismund moved through the carnage, his armor scarred and dented, but his spirit unbroken. Around him, the Black Templars fought with the fury of the Emperor's wrath, their cries echoing through the smoke-choked air. Yet amid the chaos, the greatest enemy was not the monstrous creations of the rebels, but the shadows lurking within their own ranks. A revelation tore through the chapter. A trusted leader had betrayed them, driven by promises whispered in the dark. The betrayal cut deep, shattering trust and forcing brother against brother. In the war council chamber, voices rose in fury and despair. Sigismund's command was steel tempered by sorrow. We are bound by more than blood. We are bound by faith. This betrayal will not break us. Chaplain Kalin stood beside him, a symbol of unwavering conviction. The light of the Emperor guides us, even in the darkest hour. Lieutenant Eras, eyes haunted by the carnage, asked, "How do we hold on to hope when every step forward is stained with loss?" Sigismund's gaze was steady. "By remembering why we fight, for those who cannot." The chapter prepared for the final confrontation with the remnants of the rebellion. The fate of Velis Prime and the relic hung in the balance. In the shadowed depths of the fortress, Sigismund confronted the traitor. The duel was fierce and tragic, a battle not just of blades, but of ideals and broken trust. When the dust settled, only one stood victorious, but the cost was a wound that would never fully heal. As the final battle erupted, Sigismund felt the relic's power surge within him, a double-edged gift that promised salvation and destruction. The clash was brutal and unforgiving, a tempest of steel and fury. Brothers fought and fell, each sacrifice a step toward an uncertain future. In the heart of the chaos, Sigismund made a choice, a decision that would define the legacy of the Black Templars. The echoes of that night would linger, a testament to sacrifice, betrayal, and the eternal struggle between light and shadow. The walls of the fortress trembled under the relentless assault, as if the very foundations of the Black Templars' legacy were shaking with each thunderous blow. Smoke coiled like serpents through shattered battlements, and the cries of the fallen echoed through the blood-soaked halls. Sigismund stood amidst the chaos, a solitary figure amid the storm, a beacon of unyielding resolve, yet shadowed by the weight of centuries. His every breath was a battle against the despair threatening to consume him. The relic pulsed faintly beneath his gauntlet, its cold energy a constant reminder of the price he paid for power and the heavy burden of immortality. It whispered promises of strength, but also warnings of ruin, and Sigismund felt its pull growing stronger with each passing moment. The final confrontation with the rebel leaders had begun. The air was thick with tension, as former allies turned enemies met in a clash of steel and ideology. The line between savior and tyrant blurred in the heat of battle. Among the chaos, Chaplain Kalin moved like a shadow, offering prayers for the fallen and solace for the living. His faith was unshaken, but even he could not deny the growing darkness gnawing at their souls. Sigismund faced the ultimate test, not just against external foes, but the internal war raging within his own heart. Memories of betrayal, loss, and doubt swirled like a tempest, threatening to drown him. In a decisive moment, Sigismund made a choice born of both desperation and hope. He unleashed the relic's full power, a blinding surge of energy that shattered the rebel ranks, but at a terrible cost. The fortress shook, and the air was filled with screams, of enemies and allies alike. The power he wielded was both salvation and curse, a double-edged sword cutting through the very fabric of the chapter's fate. As the dust settled, Sigismund knelt among the ruins, the weight of his actions pressing down like a gravestone. Around him lay the broken bodies of friends and foes, a silent testament to the price of victory. Chaplain Kalin approached, voice heavy with grief, yet tinged with understanding. "The path you walk is one few could bear, Sigismund. You have sacrificed more than blood. You have sacrificed pieces of your soul." Sigismund's gaze was distant, haunted. "Immortality is a burden I carry alone. The Empire may endure, but at what cost?" The echoes of battle faded into a somber quiet, the end of an era written in ash and sacrifice. The Black Templars had survived, but the scars of this crusade would linger, etched not only on stone, but in the hearts of those who bore the Emperor's name. The dawn broke with a cold, unforgiving light, casting long shadows over the shattered ruins of Velis Prime. The once mighty fortress, scarred by fire and blood, stood as a solemn monument to a crusade's bitter end. The empire they had fought to preserve was diminished, fractured by betrayal, sacrifice, and the inexorable march of time. Sigismund knelt among the remnants of his brothers, their armor cracked and stained, faces serene in the final rest. The weight of centuries pressed down upon him, an unbearable burden that no relic or victory could lighten. Immortality, once a coveted gift, now revealed itself as a curse, a sentence to witness endless cycles of rise and fall, hope and despair. His gauntleted hands traced the cold metal of the relic, its power spent yet lingering like a ghost. It had saved them, and yet it had cost them everything. The fortress chapel, now a place of quiet mourning, held the echoes of prayers whispered for the fallen and the living alike. Chaplain Kalin stood nearby, his eyes reflecting the sorrow of 1,000 battles, yet still burning with the faintest ember of faith. "Is it over?" Kalin asked softly, voice heavy with exhaustion. Sigismund's gaze met his, resolute yet weary. "For now, but the war never truly ends. It only changes faces, shifting like the tides of the void." They spoke of the cost, the sacrifices made, the brothers lost, and the empire that lingered on the brink of oblivion. The relic, once a symbol of hope and power, was now a reminder of the fragile balance between salvation and ruin. As the sun climbed higher, Sigismund rose, his steps slow but steady. He looked to the horizon, where distant stars blinked coldly, indifferent to the struggles of mortals and immortals alike. "I am bound to this fate," he murmured, "to guard a legacy that may one day crumble into dust. Yet until that day, I will stand as sentinel, an eternal warrior in an endless crusade." The Black Templars would endure, forged by fire and shadow, bound by faith and steel. Their story was one of glory and tragedy, a testament to the cost of ambition and the price of loyalty. In the vastness of the galaxy, empires rose and fell, stars were born and died, and time marched on, unforgiving, eternal. And so the chapter closed on this chapter of the Black Templars saga, not with triumphant fanfare, but with the quiet, somber acceptance of loss and the unyielding resolve to face whatever darkness came next. The relic's light flickered once more before fading, a dying star in the endless night.